media asks itself why we've lost so much faith in them, well, this is a great example of it.
The Mike Gallagher Show, weekdays at 9, right before Dennis Prager at noon on AM 1250. The Answer.
Stupidity in Education. Yes, that'll be our theme today. It starts in high school. That's what we're going to start in high school anyway. How would you feel if your kids or grandkids were being taught by your friends at PBS? And we're not talking about Sesame Street here, or even Mr. Rogers. We're talking about high school kids, teenagers, being taught about, are you ready? The Black Panthers, with lots of apologies in this little presentation and very little mention of those murdered cops. That's just one of the lessons that you pay for with your tax dollars, whether they're being taught at your kid's school or your local school, whatever, or not. Your tax dollars are paying for it because your tax dollars pay for PBS. And PBS is about a lot more than those shows on WQED that you wouldn't dream of watching. Those shows just don't disappear after they've been shown to the ridiculously small audiences that tune in to PBS. They become part of a school's curriculum. That's bad. I mean, you know, they run the show and it's on the air for an hour and disappears. If your kids don't see it, then they didn't see it. And it's just out there in the atmosphere somewhere. Well, this is not what happens here. It's being taught by the kiddies. It's being taught as part of the school curriculum. You'll be surprised to hear, or maybe you won't, what's being taught to the kiddies about suicide bombers and Hamas. And we're going to talk to Daniel Greenfield. He's an investigative reporter for FrontPageMag.com. He wrote about this today, some pretty interesting and scary stuff in there. And then we'll talk about some college stupidity. We've been telling you about the wonderful people at Harvard and actually Yale too, but this is mostly about Harvard. Decided to outlaw fraternities and sororities because they're, fraternities and sororities, which means that only one gender is allowed to join. It's been okay for about 150 years, but apparently not anymore, at least at Harvard and a lot of other schools. And at Harvard, they told people who joined a fraternity or a sorority that they wouldn't be eligible anymore for scholarships, fellowships, that kind of stuff, and wouldn't be allowed to be a captain on any sports team if they were a member of a fraternity or a sorority. Some fraternities sued, and a judge ruled in their favor the other day. We'll talk to someone from F.I.R.E, that's the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, about what the ruling means and how many other fraternities and sororities are facing similar stupidity and how this ruling might help them. But we're going to start with high school stupidity in education when we come back. Stick around.
Up in the morning and out to school. The teacher is teaching the golden rule. American history and practical math. You study them hard and hoping to pass.
They blow into town with the wind, rain, and hail. And out-of-town storm chasers going door to door, often posing as a local company offering a quick fix to desperate homeowners. If you've had damage to your roof, windows, siding, or gutters and downspouts, you may be eligible to get them replaced or repaired free of charge. Just be careful who you call. Visit WindowsRUsPittsburgh.com for a free inspection from one of their highly trained appraisers. With over 50 years in home remodeling, Windows R Us is the area's premier exterior replacement company for roofs, siding, gutters and downspouts, doors, and of course windows. If damage isn't your issue and you just want something new, you'll love their no-pressure approach, no hidden fees, and one of the fastest turnaround times in the industry. A company who will never skip town when it comes to honoring their warranty. Visit WindowsRUsPittsburgh.com. Mention STAG for an additional 10% off. Windows R Us, proud sponsor of the Jerk of the Week, heard every Friday on the John Steigerwald Show. WindowsRUsPittsburgh.com. Miracle League of Moon's Mike McGoolick joins us. Mike, how's the new field house coming?
The building permit was issued. We have the majority of the earthwork done, and they should be pouring foundation pads in the restrooms over the next week or two.
Those restrooms are really going to make a big difference for athletes with special needs, aren't they?
The ability to be able to use a restroom has always been difficult. You see how little space there is or little accommodations are made for individuals with disabilities, but it's something that we can make a little bit easier for everybody.
From the field house to the ball field to the playground, it's really going to be state-of-the-art.
It'll be updated with ramping systems and different things so that individuals that have problems with their mobility will be able to get to the same spots that everyone else easily can get to.
And every dollar you give goes directly to the project.
Our board is funding all the administrative costs, so any donation from anyone goes directly to the construction of the field.
Let's make miracles happen. Give today at miraclesinmoon.org/donate. Sponsored by Robinson Town Center, a Zamias Properties entity.
Do you or your business have financial problems? Are you overwhelmed with debt? Then call me, Attorney Dennis Spire, at 412-471-7675. My legal practice concentrates on bankruptcy law, debtor rights, and tax matters. I have over 30 years' experience as a former United States Department of Justice bankruptcy attorney and lawyer in private practice. I have represented thousands of cases faced with financial problems and lawsuits. Reorganize and get a fresh start. Call 412-471-7675 or visit my website at dennisspira.com.
Obamacare, Trump Care, ACA, COBRA. There are so many choices, but all seem to bring one word to mind: expensive. There are lots of changes happening in healthcare today. Fortunately, I know someone that has been on the forefront of health insurance for years, Todd Marley at Marley Financial. Todd and his team of professionals are licensed with virtually every healthcare provider in the country. They help determine which plan is right for you and then expertly help you choose the best plan for your needs and then do so prudently. Don't need maternity coverage? Call Marley Financial. Have pre-existing conditions? Call Marley Financial. Want just catastrophic or just accident? You know the answer. Worried about the penalty? All of Marley Financial plans are penalty exempt because they know how to design the plans. Most of their clients save 30 to 60%, which can add up to several $1,000s a year. Call Todd at Marley Financial, 724-884-1496. That's 724-884-1496 on the web at marleyfg.com.
What is us?
Us is a foundation.
Us is the future.
Us is a bond.
But right now, that bond is frayed, and we need a place that could make it whole.
From diabetes prevention to safety around water.
The Y fills the gaps
and bridges our divides.
But they can't do it without us.
Support your local Y today, because where there's a Y, there's an us.
Read by members of the Y.
The Y, for a better us.
Pain or no pain, your wisdom teeth should be checked every year. Some wisdom teeth can become impacted by never breaking through the gum, which can lead to cysts, tooth decay, and gum disease. Find a surgeon near you for a complete examination at myoms.org.
This is the John Steigerwald Show on AM 1250. The Answer.
Last week, we talked about the New York Times 1619 project. It's going to be an ongoing attempt to change the perception of the founding of the United States by making the case that everything began with the arrival of the first slave ships back in 1619. We pointed out that it's not just about people dumb enough to read the New York Times, but that the project includes making the material available as a curriculum for schools. Maybe you've heard of PBS Learning Media. It could be in a school near you. Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Journalism fellow at the Freedom Center, wrote about it for frontpagemag.com, and he joins us now. Daniel, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
So what is PBS Learning Media? It doesn't sound good.
Well, so the idea of PBS is you want to watch PBS, fine. You don't want to watch PBS, you don't have to. PBS Learning Media, its mission is to take PBS content, the same documentaries you might be ignoring, and put it right into the classroom where your son or daughter can't ignore it. Their goal is to turn PBS materials into the curriculum.
And how widespread is it? I mean, how many schools are using this stuff?
It varies from state to state, but they do claim to have millions.
Wow. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Were you aware of it before you did this story?
I was not. There's so many wrinkles in the nonprofit sector, and especially with education, that most people really have no idea is even going on. And
do you think that, I guess it might depend on which state this is happening in, a red one or a blue one maybe. Maybe it's not that simple, but people would be a little bit upset to hear about this in many places, not knowing that it's going on?
I think they would, particularly some parts of the curriculum which are supportive of domestic and international terrorists. That's left-wing terrorists in the United States, groups like the Weathermen or the Black Panthers, and Islamic terrorists abroad.
Yeah, so what has PBS Learning Media been teaching the kiddies about the Black Panthers, for example?
So it treats the Black Panthers as heroes, and we're talking about a violent, racist hate group that was responsible for the murders, not just of white people, but of black people. PBS's curriculum insists that the Black Panthers were victims, that they were mostly nonviolent except in self-defense, except in occasional confrontations with police. It doesn't mention the fact that, again, they killed plenty of people who were not police officers. And for that matter, it pretty much says that anything bad about them was the result of some sort of law enforcement conspiracy.
And is this done in the form of a video or books or both? And I mean, how long have you seen any of these presentations?
So it's online content. They do have printed materials. They have videos. So what they do is, for example, you have the Black Panther documentary, which is called Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. So they will take some clips from the documentary and suggest that the teachers actually play that in the classroom. They also have specific questions to actually ask students. And one of those questions is, how do you see applying the work of the Black Panther Party to activism today? And there's even a hashtag to encourage students to actually share the stuff on Twitter. A lot of education now is online, and that's what PBS Learning Media is taking advantage of.
Yeah, so it used to be you had to bring in a camera, a projector or a videotape machine and set it up. Now all the kids have their iPads, and they just click on and everybody's watching it, right? Or they put it up on the big screen in front of the class.
That's exactly the idea. And even worse than the actual documentary, which is pretty straightforwardly made with the cooperation and the work of Black Panther sympathizers and Black Panther members, is the fact that they're really encouraging students to think about how to model this kind of behavior.
Now, well, how do they do that?
So when they're asking students to apply the work of the Black Panther Party to activism today, and there's even a Do Now Panthers hashtag, they're basically telling them, figure out how you too can imitate the Black Panthers. And that's like telling students, figure out how you can imitate the KKK today or the Nazi Party.
You would think, and this is the first time I'm hearing about this too, and I don't mean to ask you questions that are unfair questions, because maybe it's not possible to know all this, but I would think that there'd be some teachers who wouldn't there be, I'm trying to picture a teacher looking at this and saying, wait a minute, you really want me to teach these kids about, and make them think that the Black Panthers are a pretty good group? I mean, how do they get it through past the teachers?
Well, I'm pretty sure some teachers would be uncomfortable with this, but some teachers would actually have the kind of politics where they go out and they look for this kind of material and they actually seek to bring it out into the classroom, which is really the destructive part. In many cases, it's the administrators that aren't paying much attention, teachers, parents, that aren't paying much attention, and that's how the stuff makes it into the classroom. Because once a school actually gets on board with the PBS Learning Media curriculum, then the individual materials that they're using are not necessarily scrutinized because it's PBS, and PBS is a famous brand name, and people think PBS, they think Sesame Street, they don't think Black Panthers.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that. When you think PBS, you think, oh, isn't that wonderful? They're so good with the kids, and Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, and this is a little bit more scary than that.
Yeah, it is. It's how they sneak in the really nasty, ugly, and frankly, true stuff.
And what recourse might parents have if they find out about this? They're listening to it today on the radio, and they call up their school and they say, "Hey, just checking here. Are my kids being taught this from the PBS stuff? What recourse would they have besides unelecting the school board?"
So the first line of defense is just in general to scrutinize what your children are learning, what your grandchildren are learning, and to stay engaged and involved in their education. In some cases, parents don't do that because this is just one example. There are more examples in the article that I wrote. But there's a plethora of really bad, toxic stuff that's coming into the system, and PBS Learning Media is one vector. There are a whole lot of other vectors. So you have to stay educated, stay alert, scrutinize the material, actually go through to whatever extent you can yourself. And certainly when there's something suspect, when they're covering material like terrorist or radical groups, definitely look it over and then actually get in touch with other parents, coordinate it, and then actually take that to the board and take that to the administration.
Yeah, I mentioned in the intro to you that we talked about here last week about the 1619 Project from the New York Times, and that I wasn't aware that was going on either, that the New York Times was providing curricula for high schools. What other newspapers are doing that? Are there any conservative networks or publications that are get the same access?
Not publications. There are conservative groups that have actually been working to shape curriculum, but it's a back and forth. It's a tug of war. And again, the really determining factors to what extent parents are actually engaged in their children's education, because parents do have the ability to influence it a great deal. The left is very well funded. Their nonprofits, in many cases, get government taxpayer funding. PBS obviously is a very classic example. And so they're able to do things that conservatives have much more trouble doing. That's why, obviously, you need to support it as much as possible.
And you point out in your piece, and we're talking to Daniel Greenfield. He wrote this piece. He's an investigative journalist for FrontPageMag.com. You point out in your piece that the executives at PBS, which I don't think will surprise anybody, are well paid with our money, whether we want to pay them or not.
So, of course, they're paid a fortune. Their CEO is making over $1 million a year. But again, when President Trump and anybody in Congress talks about cutting funding to PBS, they start saying, well, you actually hate Big Bird. You want to kill Big Bird.
Right.
In practical reality, PBS is actually providing so little money to Sesame Street that they took first-run episodes to HBO. So the money is not going for Big Bird. It's not going to Sesame Street. It's going to things like this. And it's also going to the salaries of the leadership.
Yeah, and I don't know how aware people are of the minuscule ratings that PBS stations get. Here in Pittsburgh, there was a story several years ago. The Pittsburgh Symphony was going over to Rome to perform for the Pope, and the local station sent 15 people over to Rome to shoot this and cover it and put it on the air. And I was working in local TV at the time, and we had this was 15 years ago maybe. We had already gotten to the point where we just never traveled because they didn't have it in the budget. Very rarely did they send anybody on a trip. And if they did, it would be one reporter and maybe one photographer, camera person. And here was the local station sending huge numbers of people over to Rome for a long time, for like a week or so. An unbelievable expense. And I looked at the ratings, and they barely got a hash mark. I mean, nobody watched this thing. But, everybody, how many people in Pittsburgh knew when they heard about this that they had paid for all those people to go over there with their tax dollars? That goes on everywhere, right?
Yeah, most people don't know. They don't know what PBS budgets actually look like. And yes, the ratings are minuscule, which is, of course, why they have to explore other options. Not enough people are actually going to watch their documentaries. They're going to make sure they're captive audiences because kids in the classroom have absolutely no choice.
Yeah, and you also talked about a presentation called Dying to Be a Martyr. Can you tell us what that's all about?
So this was a program from 4 or 5 years ago. And normally when you have a program like that, it's old. There's not going to be much interest in it. But what they're figuring out how to do is recycle into a curriculum. And Dying to Be a Martyr was about Islamic suicide bombers who actually blow themselves up killing people. The particular one that's been embedded as a curriculum focused on Israel, though the overall episode had different kinds of Islamic terrorists. Anyway, again, they're justifying the terrorists. They're asking the students to think like the terrorists do, to adopt their mindset, to understand their grievances. So, for example, there's a question in there where they have an interview with a failed suicide bomber, and the students are actually encouraged to ask, why is he upset? What could possibly make him want to do this? And, I mean, that's identifying with the terrorists. It's the same problem with the Black Panthers. They're teaching students in classrooms to actually think like our enemies.
Yeah, and as you point out in your piece, as part of this service, if that's what you want to call it, that PBS provides, teachers are encouraged to play this video of Mohammed Abu Tayoun, who you mentioned is a failed suicide bomber, and then they are given questions that they should ask the students. And based on the questions that you have in your piece here, they're leading questions. And they're very sympathetic to the suicide bomber. Yeah,
the goal is to get the students to actually identify with the suicide bomber. It's saying, for example, summarize the reasons Muhammad gave for deciding to conduct a martyr operation. By the way, using martyr operation for suicide bomber is the language of Islamic terrorists. That's not what we call it. They call it martyr operations. We call it suicide bombing. PBS is using their language.
Unbelievable. And you know, I'm guessing, I know it's a crazy idea, but if this is being used in public schools, pretty good chance there are some Jewish kids in there. And how many of those kids' parents know about this?
It's a problem. It's been a problem that's come up quite a bit in Boston, for example, where Jewish students are being exposed to pro-terrorist materials. It's a problem I know in Florida, but Florida has been pushing back against the PBS Learning Media curriculum.
They are, or they aren't pushing back?
They are. So
Okay.
The state budget actually cut funding for PBS Learning Media because a lot of this is also local, which means state budgets can actually get rid of it. But again, a lot of people don't know.
And again, the PBS is public broadcasting, and it's a government entity. So the government is pushing pro-terrorist material onto students.
It unfortunately is. And actually what the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has done is insulate itself from really democratic elections by actually having a 2-year advance appropriation, which means instead of actually the people we elected coming in and actually being able to do something about PBS's budget, they've got a 2-year advance appropriation. And this time around, they're asking for almost $500 million in a 2-year advance appropriation for 2020.
$500 million for just this part of it?
For their operations in general.
For the whole thing. Yeah, that's $500 million. But where's the interest from Republicans, conservatives in government to put a stop to this? How's it getting by them?
So nationally, Republicans in Congress generally don't want to touch PBS because, of course, they get the Sesame Street stuff.
Yeah.
Locally, some conservatives, some Republicans have been taking it on, particularly when it comes to the curriculum. But there needs to be a larger national approach to this instead of just expecting individual parents, expecting individual conservatives in different areas to do it all themselves.
So it might be a good idea for people who are listening now, if they have kids or grandkids in school, maybe just a phone call to the school and ask, just checking, are my kids being subjected to PBS Learning Media? Would that be a good start?
It's definitely a good start, particularly point out some of the more controversial problems with them, like the Black Panthers, like the Martyr, because a lot of PBS material will seem innocuous, so schools won't understand what the problem is unless you actually point out there's really some very dangerous content there.
Now, I wonder what part of the curriculum that these, like the Dying to be a Martyr, which subject would I be sitting in when I was presented with that video? Well, this is history, it's policy.
This call is now being recorded.
Pardon me? Oh, we think we lost him. Did we lose? We lost. Oh, David, are you still there? I heard somebody pop in there, a voice pop in there. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry, we lost Daniel Greenfield, but we appreciate him. We appreciate him being here. So we're out of time anyway. But you might want to give your school, your local school, a call, or the school where your kids or grandkids go, and just ask to speak to someone and ask them if they are utilizing the wonderful PBS Learning Media program that's provided. And if they are, you might want to ask them if they're showing videos about the Black Panthers and Hamas, because it's kind of scary to me that it's out there, and I just don't think that many parents really know it exists. Pretty nauseating, actually. We'll be right back.
With SRN News, I'm Keith Peters in Washington. Missouri's new law to restrict abortions is partially blocked in court.
With the law set to take effect tomorrow, the partial injunction is a legal setback for the pro-life legislation. U.S. District Judge Howard Sachs put a pause on the law's restrictions on abortions at or after 8 weeks of pregnancy, while other legal challenges to pre-viability arguments play out in court, which could take months. The judge left intact restrictions on pregnancies between 14 and 20 weeks and for situations involving the race or sex of the preborn, as well as for potential Down syndrome diagnoses. A spokesman for the Missouri Attorney General, who has a special needs child, says that they're glad the provisions relating to that issue were left in place. George Manzani reporting.
On Wall Street, the Dow down by 121 points to 25,777. The Nasdaq dropped 27. The S&P lower by 9. This is SRN News.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I was finishing undergrad and got credit cards because I couldn't work full-time. So that started the credit card journey for me.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-990-6976.
And then when I got married, we combined our credit card debt and it became impossible to pay off on our own. At that point, I was like, I don't know where to turn. And then I found Trinity.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relief. I mean, in a matter of 3 years, we've already paid down $20,000 in credit card debt, which is huge.
Call Trinity at 1-800-990-6976. That's 1-800-990-6976.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka gives a huge example of the difference between the right and the left.
Do we do that on the right? Do we actually say that we're going to kill a comedian because we disagree with their stance politically? It's not even a political stance, is it? He's just making a jokey video, and it involves the Clintons, and therefore he must receive death threats.
America First with Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Afternoons at 3, right before John Steigerwald at 5 on AM 1250. The Answer.
Community Bank.
City Mission.
#1 Cochrane.
Highmark Stadium.
Peters Township Community Center.
Angelo's Restaurant.
What do all these businesses have in common?
Nello Construction.
Design and build with one company.
Nello Construction.
Full service construction from the ground up.
Renovation. Expansion.
Nello Construction. The choice for business.
See the projects.
Begin the journey
at NelloConstruction.com.
If you're worried about market volatility or the possibility of losing money in the next market crash, the time to act is now. Effective financial management involves identifying opportunities. And with a 10-year bull market run, markets around all-time highs, and a highly contested election right around the corner, we have an opportunity now to protect what's important. Don't risk losing a significant portion of your life savings in the next market downturn. Call Hunt & Associates today, 844-366-HUNT. That's 844-366-4868.
This is Chris Abernethy of Abernethy & Hagerman. You don't want the government deciding what happens to your estate or how much they will take. At Abernethy & Hagerman, estate administration is the heart and soul of our practice. We have the experience to help not only plan, but administer your estate properly, to protect your assets, minimize taxes, and ensure that your inheritance gets to the ones you love. Decide for yourself. Abernethy & Hagerman. Legal help that lasts a lifetime. Visit a-h.law.
Homeowners love their Pella windows and doors, and we love how happy we made Susan from Sewickley.
I just have to tell you, this bay window is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's fantastic. It really is beautiful. I mean, beautiful.
Can we install some happiness for you? Right now, get 50% off installation or 18 months, no payments, no interest. Call for your free consultation. We'll come to you. 888-78-PELLA, PellaPittsburgh.com.
Stuck in traffic? We've got the answer.
Lots of volume delays on pretty much all the major highways. We're especially stacked up on the Parkway East, outbound Boulevard of the Allies to Edgewood, Swissvale. On the inbound side, not too terrible there, but Parkway West, that's looking busy inbound. Green Tree Road to the Fort Pitt Tunnel. Parkway North, heavy outbound from Hazlitt Street to Venture Street. Also from the Mount Nebo Road overpass up to 79. On 79, northbound delays from the Parkway North to 910. That's a look at traffic. I'm Jenny Robinson.
AM 1250, The Answer. Weather.
Mostly cloudy and muggy tonight with a couple of showers and in some spots a heavier thunderstorm, low 65. Tomorrow, a morning shower in the area, especially east of the city. Then clouds will give way to some sunshine, 78. Mainly clear, cooler and more comfortable tomorrow night, 54. A nice day Thursday, mostly sunny, not too humid, high 76 degrees. With your AccuWeather forecast, I'm meteorologist Danielle Niddle.
The John Steigerwald Show, AM 1250, The Answer.
Well, Well, fraternities and sororities have been on college campuses around the country for about 150 years or longer. It shouldn't surprise anybody that with the insanity surrounding gender issues in 2019, that the geniuses running our institutions of higher learning would have a problem with them. Harvard had a big problem and outlawed them a little while ago, a couple years ago, and some fraternities sued and won. At least they are looks like they might be on the way to winning. Robert Shibley is the executive director of F.I.R.E, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. He joins us now. Robert, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what did the judge rule on the Harvard case that looks like a win for F.I.R.E and the students?
Well, the judge in Boston, this is a federal judge, ruled that Harvard's motion to dismiss the case was going to be rejected for a couple of different reasons, and I'll get into why that's important. But the reasons that it was rejected is they said that the plaintiffs here, which were some fraternities, sororities, and 3 John Doe plaintiffs, who didn't want to reveal their identities to Harvard because they didn't want to be punished, had made out a case that a jury could find that Harvard was indeed discriminating against them, both because of who they want to associate with, so violating the freedom of expressive association, and just plain gender discrimination because they were being told that they were not allowed to be in groups where they could be only with people of the same sex. And it's interesting to see how that's worked out, even though Harvard got rid of all of these groups, these fraternities, sororities, and these final clubs, which are sort of a Harvard-specific kind of organization. In the name of gender equality, what's turned out to happen is all of the all-female clubs are gone, and the all-male clubs, from what everybody can tell, are still there.
So, yeah, we did this story a while ago, and there's also an issue at Yale. They tried to something similar there, but why is it that the fraternities survived and the sororities didn't? And when they said they had to go, did they? I know that they threatened him with not being allowed to get scholarships and fellowships and be a captain of a sports team and all that stuff. How do you just get rid of a sorority?
Well, fraternities and sororities at Harvard weren't actually officially recognized organizations. So these would just be like if you and your friends got together with some other students and joined a club that you met in your dorm room or you met maybe in somebody's house off campus. So Harvard realized they couldn't get rid of them the way that universities usually punish fraternities or sororities, where they put some kind of sanctions on them, say they can't come to football games or
for
whatever
violations of some kind, breaking the law.
Instead, they said they would go after the individuals with a McCarthyite blacklist, and I'm not exaggerating. If you were found to have been a member of a fraternity or sorority or final club, they would tell you that you basically the dean would not give you any recommendations. You couldn't, like you said, you couldn't be a leader in a college group or a sports team. So it really did take away a lot of the opportunities for which people attend Harvard. I think the reason that the male groups still appear to be there, and of course, now they're really having to run very underground so they don't get found out, is because they've been established for a lot longer. Until recently, Harvard didn't have fraternities and sororities. They only had these final clubs, and they were all male. So the all-male final clubs, they have houses. They have, powerful alumni and that sort of thing, so they can keep going, but the women didn't have that same infrastructure. And so when Harvard decided to go after the men, it ended up boomeranging and hitting the women, more than the men.
Yeah, and they're basically casting aspersions on anybody who is a rotten enough person to want to belong to an all-male or all-female organization. Like we'd prefer that you just leave because we're not going to let you. We're going to try to prevent you from participating in as many good things that we have here on the campus as possible to punish you for having the nerve to want to be in a fraternity. That's just unbelievable.
That's right. Me. That's right, and if you really want to talk nerve, what's sort of particularly galling is the now former president of Harvard, a woman named Drew Gilpin-Faust, actually attended Bryn Mawr College, which is still,
female.
even to this day, all female, and while this is going on, was on the board of trustees for Bryn Mawr College. So she was not only attended a single-sex place, but was still, working to support it and being on there. So, seeing the leadership at Harvard go hard after these, supposedly villainous and sort of throwbacky single-sex organizations is really pretty rich.
So this woman was there at the time that Harvard made the decision to go after these groups?
Yeah, it was basically a decision, from what everybody can tell, it was a decision between her and the dean of Harvard College, who's still there, Rakesh Khurana, who was sort of really driving the bus for this. And the process Harvard used to put this in place was so ridiculous that really you could only get away with it at a place with very little or no accountability like Harvard. At one point, in order to see the report that they were supposedly putting together to make the recommendation, you actually had to ask for permission, and then you had to view it in a locked room in the administration building after they'd made sure you couldn't make any copies, it didn't have your phone. I mean, it was like you were going into, a spy movie. I mean, it was that level of ridiculousness, and yet, this is the way it went through the 2 years it took them to force this through.
And how much of a setback is the ruling by the judge that the suit can go forward? How much of a setback is that for Harvard? Can Harvard still win this?
Well, Harvard could still win this, but when it comes to cases that have to do more with the principles of the law or the Constitution rather than the actual facts of the case, and this is one of those cases, there isn't really a lot of disagreement over what Harvard did or why it did it. A lot of the sort of legal action comes at these, what is generally an earlier stage of litigation. In this case, the motion to dismiss. So Harvard's best chance in this case was probably to get the court to say, well, there's no way that even with all of the allegations you've made, there's no way this could possibly be a winner, or maybe you don't have standing, which means you didn't have the right to bring the case against Harvard. And instead of doing that, the judge actually said, well, no, it looks like, you have, your allegations at least amount to something where you might be able to prove this. What that means is Harvard, they may appeal at this stage, they may wait, but they're going to be eventually, if this doesn't get, shot down by a higher court, which I think is unlikely, but you never know, is going to have to submit to discovery. They're going to have to start turning over emails and all the ways they made their decisions. And like I said, the way they made this decision was really bizarre. So were I Harvard, I would not want that to happen, but, I'm not Harvard. They have a lot of very high-paid and expensive folks there and a lot of money, so, anything can happen. They are an organization with a lot of power.
And what's always amazing to me about this is that imagine the response that you would get if Harvard if it was the other way around, and there were lots of clubs on campus that were members of both both sexes, male and female. And imagine if Harvard said, okay, listen, we don't like this idea. From now on, we want all male and all female clubs. You can't intermingle. What kind of response that would be. And the fact that people don't understand that if you can tell someone they can't have only men or only women, they could also be told that they have to have both men and women. I mean, they have to be only men or only women.
That's right, and where it's really interesting to hear what the women who were affected by this, who were in the sororities, had to say, because a lot of the reason they had started sororities is they felt like the male final clubs and fraternities were more established, and they wanted specifically to have places where they could just be around other women. It's actually basically they were saying the same thing that men say often when they're talking about why they value their time in fraternities, and yet in order to get at this, supposedly, mustache-twirling villains of the evil frat boys at Harvard, it became clear to Harvard they were going to have to break some eggs to make this omelet, and that's exactly what they did, and it's sort of amazing the level with which they were willing to go in order to accomplish this feat of social engineering, which frankly is doomed from the start. Telling people who they can and can't associate with has a terrible record in the United States. Back in the 1920s, Harvard actually did the very same thing to students who they thought might be gay or who even associated with people they thought might be gay. Harvard went after them. And then, of course, in the 50s and 60s, we had McCarthyism, some of which took place at Harvard, and now we're having another moral panic kind of situation, and we're making the same mistakes over and over again. And it really is unbecoming of, one of America's and the world's really great universities.
We're talking to Robert Shibley. He's the executive director of FIRE. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. So what other things are you guys involved in there at FIRE? That what are the hot things going on right now?
Well, we recently announced that a professor at a university called the New School in New York was not going to be punished. She had been charged with harassment because she, in quoting African-American author James Baldwin, had used the N-word while reading from his own quotes. This is something that he used.
He's using the book in class and reads from it?
They were discussing why a documentary made about him didn't use the word. So it really could not have been more relevant.
Right.
Somebody complained, and lo and behold, she finds herself in front of the dean trying to defend herself from using an African-American author's own words in discussing the author. This is the kind of sort of madness that we're seeing on university campuses right now because of the demands to sort of enforce this sort of stifling intellectual, like nobody say anything that could offend anyone, even if it's meaningful.
Triggers. Yeah. It was a trigger.
Yeah, that's right.
So I wanted, before you go, we have a couple minutes here. I wanted to ask you about Yale. I don't know if you guys were involved in Yale. My favorite story about that was that I don't have it in front of me here, but I think what happened was some college women went to a fraternity party and they didn't like the way they were treated, and the guys were drunk. Imagine that at a fraternity party. And they hated the way they were treated, and they complained. But what they wanted to do was be allowed to join. After they complained about what a terrible scene it was there, they sued so that they'd be allowed to join the fraternity. Did you know about that?
I don't know about that. That's not something that FIRE was involved in. But, it's interesting. Title IX, which is the law we hear a lot about in this area, and that bans sex discrimination in federally funded education programs, actually has an exception specifically for fraternities and sororities, because when they wrote the law, they understood that these organizations were important to the people who were in them. And so, I don't know how that lawsuit might have come out. But it's certainly something that the law itself takes into account. I know that I was never in a fraternity, but I know a lot of people who were in them really valued their time. And, of course, I understand that people feel like they, have been treated poorly by people in fraternities. But part of being a civil libertarian and, frankly, being an American is, not just assuming that since somebody who you think is like another person, that person is like it too. I mean, that's smearing by association, and we're supposed to be democratic citizens who are a little more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, and so what do you think is the future of fraternities and sororities on college campuses now? Do you see, is this a trend where they try to get rid of them, or will this might maybe put a stop to that?
I think it is a trend where they're going to try to get rid of them. One of the reasons that FIRE fought so hard against what Harvard was doing is because many colleges think that to be a good college, you just need to copy Harvard. And so people like to mimic what they do. So I do think that it will be very beneficial for people's freedom of association if Harvard ends up not being able to pull this off. I think fraternity and sororities are under a lot more threat these days than they used to be. I think there's a lot of stereotypes about fraternities and sororities that people are, happy to just repeat without really thinking about them. When, different groups of people and different individuals are different, and we recognize that in other areas. So I often counsel fraternities and sororities, don't just take unfair punishments lying down. And I think we're starting to see fraternities and sororities be more resistant to that, but it's been sort of a long struggle to get them to realize that, if we don't all hang together, we're all going to hang separately on this one.
Right. Hey, Robert, I'm out of time. I appreciate you being here. Robert Shibley, Executive Director of F.I.R.E, Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. I think you won one at Harvard. Congratulations on the win. I hope you keep winning. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll be right back.
Get on the old road and come it with the Captain Sigma on it, and we'll all have another keg of beer. For it's not for knowledge that we came to college, but we raised hell while we're here.
We're talking to Rocky Bleier. He's involved with the Miracle League of Moon Township and the construction of a Miracle League athletic field. The fields are designed to make it possible for kids with special needs to play sports.
Every child, no matter what the situation, deserves a chance to be able to play, to compete, and have a place that's safe, takes care of needs, that's organized. This will be the fourth Miracle League field that will be built. Now we got 4 places to be able to travel, so it broadens the whole interest of sports. It's just terrific for a community to do that.
There's a buddy system I thought was pretty impressive. What's that all about?
Kids with special needs have a buddy, a child who's in school. It's like having an older brother or sister involved with you. So it's really good, and that everybody has human dignity of being able to participate.
The website is miraclesinmoon.org. Check it out, and let's help make this dream a reality. Hey, Rocky, thanks, and we'll be talking to you again about this project. Appreciate you coming on to talk about it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thanks.
Rocky Bleier.
Imagine doing one thing that gives you an entirely different perspective about your place in the world. Think it would be worth it? Dennis Prager here, inviting you to join me for a 10-day Stand with Israel tour, a tour through the land of Israel in December 2019. Come with me to get firsthand insight into Israel's fascinating past and promising future. Walk the ancient temple steps, sail on the Sea of Galilee, and so many more unforgettable moments. Return home inspired, renewed, and empowered. If you've ever dreamed of seeing Israel, this is your opportunity. With expert guides and important lectures at key sites, we'll be together in the comfort and safety of luxurious accommodations the whole time. Join me for a life-changing adventure to give you a renewed sense of purpose.
Get more details about the trip or sign up now to join Mike Gallagher and Dennis Prager on the Stand with Israel tour by going to theanswerpgh.com/Israel. That's theanswerpgh.com/Israel.
It is a horrible scenario, but it happens. Dennis writes about his wife. She was diagnosed with leukemia. In fact, she's a 2-time survivor. And in the midst of all that, they ran up over $1 million in medical bills. Thankfully, they're Medishare members. And Dennis says they are so thankful for that, how others came together to meet their needs. And that's how so many Medishare members feel. This is not health insurance. It's different. You don't have to pay for things you don't believe in. And like Dennis found out, it just works. So if you join Medishare, not only do you save a lot of money, the typical family saves about $500 a month, but you know where your money's going each month. You're helping people, and if the time should come, they'll be helping and even praying for you. So yes, it's different, and as more than 400,000 people now know when it comes to healthcare costs, different is beautiful. Find out more. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE. 844-45-BIBLE.
Warning. Property protected by electric fence. Sharks sighted in water.
Warnings are truly handy.
Bridge out.
But you may not always get a warning when it comes to threats to your identity or the personal information on your devices. That's why LifeLock Identity Theft Protection includes Norton Security for even more protection. LifeLock uses proprietary technology to help detect identity threats, like your personal info for sale on the dark web. And Norton Security protects up to 5 devices from ransomware and other online threats. Plus, if you have a problem, our agents will work to fix it. Of course, no one can prevent all identity theft or cybercrime or monitor all transactions at all businesses, but having someone looking out for you,
warning, minefield ahead,
will help keep you out of danger. Join now and get 10% off your first year. Go to lifelock.com and enter promo code TITTLE. That's promo code TITTLE for 10% off. LifeLock with Norton. More detection, more protection.
Warning, listening to this program may expose you to toxic masculinity. The John Steigerwald Show on AM 1250. The Answer.
I got a couple minutes left here. I want to mention about Ilhan Omar. She's doing a nice job as a congresswoman from Minnesota. She's part of the squad, and I'm sure you know all about her. There's a I don't know if it's been I think she hasn't admitted to it yet. I don't know if she's been actually found. It's for certain that she married her brother, but there's a pretty good chance she did, which is, as a way to get him or both of them into the country legally. Not her, she's already here, but to get him here. And then she did something else that might have been a little bit crooked to get some a college loan or two. We don't know. I'm not really sure what her actual name is. Other than that, she's doing a pretty nice job. But then there's this. The most recent thing is that a woman, Dr. Beth Minette, says that her husband Tim told her in April that he was having an affair with Omar, and that he even made a, quote, shocking declaration of love for her before he ditched his wife. That's according to a filing submitted in D.C. Superior Court. The doctor's 55, and her husband's 38. And this is the guy who's cheating with Omar. He was looking for something a little younger, apparently. So that's one part of it. Then this side just came across. Omar's campaign, according to the Daily Caller, funded travel for the man she's alleged to have had an affair with, according to records. It says here, has dispersed tens of thousands of dollars in, quote, travel expenses to the company owned by the political strategist whose wife accused him, today, of having an affair with Omar. Federal Election Commission records reveal the Omar campaign began making travel reimbursements to Tim Minette's company, E Street Group LLC, on April 1st, about a week before Dr. Beth Minette said her husband admitted to her having an affair with Omar. Now, my one question that I only have here, she's having an affair. I really don't care. But I'm just wondering, what would the reaction be if this were a Republican and not the face of the Democrat Party and a hero of the media? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, New York Times, and Washington Post. I got a feeling it's going to be kind of, pushed under the rug a little bit. We'll see. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
The John Steigerwald Show is a production of AM 1250 The Answer and Salem Media Group.
Here is your new Pella Lifestyle window when open. Here it is.